Ever wonder what a high-stakes corporate standoff looks like from the inside? Well, today we get a peek. We're breaking down a really tense negotiation happening in Spain between the outsourcing giant Teleperformance and the powerful UGT union. And we can do this because we're looking at an internal union memo that lays out their entire strategy.
And really, this whole conflict boils down to one central question. You've got this clash between a company that's building a seemingly perfect, airtight legal case for layoffs, and a union firing back saying, hey, wait a minute, you can't just ignore the human cost here.
So, let's set the stage. On one side, you have Teleperformance. On the other, the UGT union. They are locked in a formal negotiation over a collective dismissal, mass layoffs, and right now, neither side is even blinking. Now, in Spain, this whole formal process has a name. It's called an ERE. And the most important thing to get here is that a company can't just decide to fire a huge group of people one day. They are legally required to prove they have a justified cause and then negotiate the terms with employee reps. And that negotiation is exactly what we're going to break down. Okay, so how many jobs are we actually talking about? This is where it starts to get pretty interesting, because the number itself has become a moving target, a real point of contention in these talks. At the very beginning, the number on the table was 145 people. That was the starting point, the baseline for this entire negotiation. But by November 12th, things had already shifted. You had a couple of voluntary resignations and one person on leave. So 3 people came off the list. The official number dropped to 142. It's a small change, sure, but it's a huge deal because it shows the whole situation is still in flux. And that number could drop even more. The company has put 2 potential lifelines on the table. If they keep a certain internal project going, 8 jobs could be saved. And if one specific employee accepts a relocation, that's 1 more job saved. All of a sudden, the potential final number is 133, and the whole negotiation is starting to focus on saving those 9 specific jobs. So while the union is focused on these shifting numbers, Teleperformance was focused on something much more solid, their legal case. I mean, they weren't justifying the layoffs. They were building what they hoped was a completely unassailable legal fortress. Their whole argument rests on one single event. Their major client, Stripe, terminated their service contract. It's a simple cause and effect argument. The client left, so the jobs tied to that client have to go. They're basically saying, hey, our hands are tied here. And you've got to see how methodically they did this. They didn't just say it, they brought their receipts. First, they present the actual termination email from Stripe, a certified translation no less. Then, they provide a copy of the specific contract clause that allowed Stripe to do it. This wasn't just an argument, it was a carefully constructed evidence trail designed to be, well, bulletproof. So how in the world do you fight a legal fortress like that? Well, you don't attack the walls directly. Instead, UGT made a really clever strategic pivot. They basically said, okay, for now, we won't argue about the cause of the layoffs. Instead, they shifted the entire fight to the consequences, demanding a social package to protect the workers. And their demands were all about 2 things, giving employees choice and opportunity. They pushed for things like voluntary dismissals and job swaps, to give people some control over their own fate. They also demanded things like language tests to help people qualify for other open roles. It was all about softening the blow. But here's their real power move. The biggest thing they asked for was compensation that's legally equivalent to an unfair dismissal. Now think about that. The company just spent all this time and energy building a just cause case, and the union comes back and says, pay us as if you didn't have one. This is the maximum possible severance payout under Spanish law, and it's a direct challenge to the company's whole story. And demanding that specific amount of money, that is the union's biggest bargaining chip. It's them putting their cards on the table and sending a crystal clear signal to the company. If you refuse to negotiate social measures with us, we are fully prepared to take this whole thing to court and challenge the legality of your entire case. So what you have here are 2 immovable objects, right? The company with its bulletproof legal case and the union with its non-negotiable demand for a social safety net. You can probably guess what happened next. The talks have ground to a complete and total halt. The company's response to the union's power move? Well, according to the memo, it all came down to a single word. They called the compensation demand unacceptable. Not let's negotiate, not that's difficult.
Just unacceptable. And with that one word, they pretty much slam the door on the whole negotiation.
And this really lays it all out. On one side, you've got Teleperformance, sticking to its legal argument and refusing to budge on any significant social costs. And on the other, you have the UGT union, which now sees the company as completely unyielding, leaving them with really only one card left to play, a legal challenge. Which brings us right here to this crossroads. The memo we're looking at is from that November 12th meeting where everything just stalled. Now, the clock is ticking towards their next meeting on November 19th. That's the decision point. That's the day we're probably going to find out if this thing ends with a handshake or a lawsuit. And that leaves us with this one big final question. Teleperformance has called the union's key financial demand unacceptable, pretty much taking that social package right off the table. So does that force the union's hand? Is their only strategic move left to stop arguing about severance pay and instead go on the attack? To try and find a crack in the company's supposedly bulletproof legal armor? That's the strategic shift to watch for.